All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, in fact. Let me just turn this phone off. As you may have seen this morning, the Secretary General delivered via video message the keynote speech at the Economist's Sustainability Summit. His address focused on keeping 1.5 alive. The Secretary General warned that while some progress was made at COP26 in Glasgow in November, the main emission gap problem was not properly addressed. We are sleepwalking to climate catastrophe, the Secretary General said, quoting the latest IPCC report, which says that half of humanity is already living in the danger zone. The Secretary General also said that the fallout from Russia's war in Ukraine risks upending global food and energy markets with major implications for the global climate agenda. He warned that countries could become so consumed by the immediate fossil fuel supply gap that they neglect or kneecap policies to cut fossil fuel use. This madness, he said, adding that addition to fossil fuels is mutually assured destruction. The Secretary General urged countries to put the pedal to the metal towards a renewable energy future. His full remarks and video were all shared with you earlier. Quite a lengthy humanitarian update for you on Ukraine. We, along with our partners, remain deeply concerned over the impact of reported fighting on civilians trapped in eastern, northeastern, and southern Ukraine, including in Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkiv, Izium, Donetsk, Mykolaiv, and Mariupol. Since February 24th, more than 10 million people have now been forced from their homes in search of safety and security, nearly a quarter of the population of Ukraine. This includes an estimated 6.5 million men, women, and children who are internally displaced, and that's according to our friends at the International Organization for Migration, and nearly 3.5 million people, mostly women and children, who have crossed international borders out of Ukraine as refugees, and that's according to UNHCR. Humanitarian organizations are concerned about the risks of trafficking and sexual exploitation, and IOM has scaled up its trafficking prevention measures, providing verified and safe information to refugees and third country nationals on the move. IOM has also reinforced its regional hotlines to help people with important safety and resource information. The World Health Organization says it has verified 6 additional reports of attacks on health care in Ukraine yesterday. As of the 20th of March, WHO has verified 52 attacks on health care in 25 days. WHO notes that this is more than 2 attacks per day, stressing that this is, of course, unacceptable and that health care must always be protected. For its part, the UN Children's Fund and the UN Refugee Agency, in partnership with local governments and civil society organizations, are setting up what they call Blue Dot centers. Those are one-stop safe spaces for children and women. Blue Dot centers help to identify unaccompanied and separated children and ensure their protection, as well as provide a hub for essential services and information for traveling families. WFP said that it has reached more than 330,000 crisis-affected people inside Ukraine with food assistance, and that's since the beginning of the conflict. Food deliveries to cooperating partners is also being scaled up, reaching more than 900 metric tons over the last days. In Kharkiv, the World Food Programme doubled its bread distribution through partners, reaching nearly 78 metric tons for about 260,000 people. In Kiev, following the delivery of 26 metric tons of high-energy biscuits, WFP's partners have delivered about 325 of those metric tons of vegetable oil and 478 metric tons of wheat flour to nearly 70,000 vulnerable people. In Dnipro, some 2.2 metric tons of mixed canned food was also distributed to the most vulnerable. And as you will have seen last Friday, Mina Wad, our crisis coordinator in Ukraine, said the first UN organized convoy reached Sumy with emergency supplies from 35,000 people and equipment to repair water systems to help another 50,000 people. This was organized through good cooperation between the governments of Ukraine and the Russian Federation. We hope that this is the first of many convoys that will make deliveries to people trapped by the fighting. Quick note on Yemen. I can tell you that we strongly condemn the recent attacks on several energy and other civilian facilities in Saudi Arabia, which reportedly caused material damage and have been claimed by the Houthis. Attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure are prohibited by international humanitarian law. These actions damage prospects for peace and regional stability and are detrimental to the ongoing mediation efforts of our Special Envoy, Hans Grunberg. We call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint and avoid any further escalation. We strongly urge the parties to engage constructively and without precondition with Mr. Grunberg and his mediation efforts, with the main aim of advancing the political process to reach a comprehensive negotiated settlement to end the conflict in Yemen. And just to give you a quick update on what Mr. Grunberg has been doing, on Saturday he was in Muscat, where he met with Ansar Allah's chief negotiator, Mohammed Abdul Salam, as well as Omani officials. They discussed ongoing consultations and UN consultations and efforts to address the dire humanitarian situation in Yemen, including possible truce during the holy month of Ramadan, which, as you know, is coming up. Mr. Grunberg is continuing discussions with various parties to the conflict. And the seventh session of the Syrian-led, Syrian-owned, UN-facilitated Constitutional Committee convened in Geneva today. In advance of the meeting of the small body, the UN envoy, Geir Pedersen, said that during this session he hopes to see the Constitutional Committee work with a sense of seriousness and purpose and determination to make progress as the situation demands. He spoke to the press yesterday, said he'd met with two co-chairs on Sunday morning. They discussed the four principles being discussed this week, which are the basics of governance, state identity, state symbols, and the structure and functioning of public authorities. And I want to read into the record a statement on a recent judgment issued by the Appeals Chamber of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. The Secretary General takes note of the judgment delivered by the Special Tribunal for Lebanon, in which Hassan Habib Meri and Hussein Hassan Onesi were convicted in relation to the 14th February 2005 attack in Beirut that killed former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri and 21 other people and injured more than 226 people. Mr. Meri and Mr. Onesi remain at large. The Secretary General's thoughts are with the victims of the February 14th attack and their families. The Secretary General expresses his deep appreciation for the dedication and hard work of the judges and staff involved in this case through the years. The Special Secretary General notes the independence and impartiality of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon and calls upon all to respect the decisions of the tribunal. The Secretary General urges the international community to continue supporting the work of the Special Tribunal as it brings this case to a close. The Special Tribunal is an independent court of law established at the request of the government of Lebanon, pursuant to an agreement between the UN and the government of Lebanon, was brought into effect by resolution of the Security Council. Turning to the Central African Republic, our colleagues at the UN peacekeeping mission there are telling us that over the weekend, key opposition parties have withdrawn from the Republican dialogue, which began earlier today. In communiques issued over the weekend, they deplored the lack of inclusivity as a reason for withdrawing from the dialogue process. In a tweet, Moncur Ndiaye, the head of the mission, said the dialogue is a very important opportunity for the Central African Republic. He called on all those involved to work towards a historic compromise to allow the dialogue to bring about a consensus to help move the country forward. The Republican dialogue is expected to conclude on the 27th of March and will address issues such as peace, security, governance, the rule of law, and the strengthening of institutions. And our colleagues at UNESCO in Paris today released a report that says that groundwater, which accounts for 99% of all liquid fresh water on Earth, is being undervalued, mismanaged, and even abused. The authors of the report call on states to commit themselves to develop adequate and effective groundwater management and governance policies to address the current and future water crises throughout the globe. The report is online. Quite a few international days to flag. Today is the International Day of Nowruz. In a message, the Secretary General said Nowruz is a celebration of new beginnings, the beginning of a new year, and the arrival of spring and the renewal of nature. Today is the first day of spring, which is no coincidence. Today is also World Down Syndrome Day, World Poetry Day, and also the International Day of Forests. In his message, the Secretary General said the commitment to halt deforestation has been loud and clear, and yet each year we will degrade and destroy more than 10 million hectares of forest. He called on countries to implement the recent Glasgow leaders' declaration on forest and land use and other instruments designed to protect our forests. And today is also the International Day of the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And as you will recall, the Secretary General spoke at the event in the General Assembly on Friday. And lastly, we say a big gracias to our friends in Bogota, as Colombia became the 75th member state of these proud United Nations to pay their budget dues in full. Celia.
Steph, is the Secretary General thinking of going to meet the Ukrainian president at one point, like some other did? And could he, I don't know, think of being the mediator in that crisis, that war, actually?
Well, I mean, when you talk about this war, I think from the get-go, the Secretary General has been very clear that he is available for his good offices. As you know, when anyone mediates or offers their good offices between various parties, there needs to be an agreement for all parties to accept that person. So once we have something to announce on that, I will let you know. I have no announcements for you on potential travel. The Secretary General remains very much involved on the diplomatic end. He just, I think a few minutes ago, hung up the phone with the president of Lithuania. He's been speaking to a number of leaders in the region and permanent representatives, and will continue to do so.
It's something to talk over the phone, but it's another thing to go and to meet with Zelensky.
He has been in touch with, he'd spoken not too long ago with President Zelensky. And if I have anything else to announce, I will share that with you. Edith.
Thank you, Steph. A couple of follow-ups on Yemen and Mr. Grunberg's meetings in Muscat. First, what was the reaction from the Houthis to the call for a truce in Ramadan?
Well, those discussions are clearly ongoing. We did see what happened on Sunday when they claimed the firing a number of missiles towards Saudi Arabia. Mr. Grunberg, I think, is not discouraged in the least, and he will continue to work towards at least getting a cessation of hostilities or a truce during the upcoming month of Ramadan.
And a second follow-up on Yemen. We know that he has not gotten an invitation from the Houthis to visit Sana'a. Was that issue discussed, and was there any movement on arranging for a trip?
I think, given the delicate security situation in these parts, once he is in Sana'a, we would announce it. But I have nothing to share with you at this point. Okay. Pam, and then sorry.
Just a second question. Suspected militants killed 13 soldiers in the eastern part of Burkina Faso. Does the Secretary General have any comment on that mass killing?
Look, we're obviously looking to those reports. This is confirmed, and it looks, I think, very much that it is. It is yet just another horrendous example of the issues of insecurity that we see in the region, in the Sahel, and the need for a coordinated international response. Pam, and then Edward.
A few follow-ups. Also, one is there a readout of the Lithuania, or there will be, of the Lithuania call with the SG?
Beyond the fact that they spoke about various aspects of the crisis in Ukraine, no.
Okay, and I had asked you last week, you thought you might be able to follow up if the UN agencies have met roadblocks on humanitarian aid, because there was some humanitarian aid blocked?
Well, I mean, we had a successful convoy on Friday. I mean, the roadblocks are the fighting. I mean,
Right.
that's the fighting. The fighting is continuing. I mean, we're seeing we're seeing the continued fighting. Obviously, as bombs are being dropped, as fighting continues, it's challenging, if not impossible, to put through a convoy. They put through a convoy on Friday thanks to the coordination mechanisms that we have with the Ukrainian government, with the Russian Federation. We very much hope that the success we had on Friday can be replicated in the days ahead.
And in terms of the coordination, there has not been a successful humanitarian resolution yet in the GA and in the Security Council. But these agreements are sort of mini humanitarian, agreements to let aid in?
It's punctual deconfliction, right? And it's a system. We have similar systems working in Syria, working in Yemen. It's to ensure that we can get safe passage for aid in. So in any situation, we tell the parties, this is what we want to do, this is where we're going, and we try to get some sort of clearance where we feel it is safe enough to send humanitarian goods and human beings in.
And final piece on this is and no humanitarian workers have been injured or killed so far of UN agencies or staff?
I know none, thank God, that I've been told.
Okay, thank you.
Edward?
Hi, Stéphane. Couple of questions. First, an airliner today crashed in South China with 132 people on board. Any response from the Secretary General about that?
Well, we are obviously very saddened by this news. We send our condolences to the families of the victims and to the people and government of China.
And second question. Today, the Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, just declared that Myanmar army committed genocide against the Rohingya. So what's the response from the United Nations?
Look, from our standpoint, from the Secretary General, our human rights colleagues, I think we have been extremely clear at expressing our deep concern, our horror at the repeated human rights violations that have been committed by the security forces in Myanmar. We will continue to highlight them. We will continue to speak up. On the specific issue of genocide, as you know, within the UN context, that's a decision that needs to be, or ruling that needs to be made by a judicial body. There are a number of judicial processes within international institutions that are ongoing to decide this. It's not for the Secretary General to prejudge it. However, I would underscore that he is always called for accountability for the suffering of the people of Myanmar at the hands of the security forces.
One last question. Last week, President Biden called President Vladimir Putin a war criminal, and then the Russian side summoned the ambassador of the U.S., said that Russian-American relations are on the verge of rupture. How would this relationship involvement will impact the world order, especially the functioning of the United Nations on the priority issues?
Well, I mean, we're already seeing, let me put it this way. It's clear to all to see the negative impact that exists within the United Nations legislative bodies when there are tensions within member states, and especially when we talk about the Security Council, tensions between members of the permanent 5 members of that Security Council. And that's why the Secretary General has always called for greater dialogue, because the relations between, some of these the member states of the United Nations, and negative relations between, to quote George Orwell, or to paraphrase George Orwell, all countries are equal, but some are more equal than others. And we very well know the detrimental impact that can have on the international system.
And one last question, also on Ukraine. Have you seen the draft resolution submitted by the member state, which would probably vote this week on General Assembly? about the humanitarian situation in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Would you like to share those draft resolution with us? Is that
I think you
possible?
would have to ask my friend Paulina in
All
her
right,
office to
okay,
share. It's not for
okay.
me to do that. Yes, sir. And then, Senor.
It's me? Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you. I can see you.
Okay, more on the Western Sahara. Today, the personal envoy, de Mistura, met with the foreign minister of Spain. And now there is a shift on the Spanish stance on the conflict. Can it mean that there will be a new approach of the personal envoy to the conflict? Second question on the same issue. Algeria has called his ambassador in Spain in protest of the new shift of the Spanish government. Is that a concern for the UN? Thank you.
Well, I mean, let me just put a little background on this. You know, obviously, we saw the developments over the weekend, the announcement by Spain relating to Morocco and Western Sahara. For Mr. de Mistura, the personal envoy of the Secretary General for Western Sahara, he remains in touch with relevant interlocutors. We, of course, again, reiterate the importance of maintaining full commitment to the UN-facilitated political process in line with Security Council Resolution 2602 and other relevant Security Council resolutions. So I think our approach, Mr. de Mistura's approach, will continue to be based on the relevant Security Council resolutions. We feel it's very important for all the stakeholders in this to continue to support his work and our approach based on these resolutions. Mr. de Mistura is in touch with a number of parties. As you can imagine, knowing him, he's been working the phones and meeting with people. He met with José Manuel Alvarez in Brussels today. I know he's had contacts with others, I think including the Algerians, and he'll be speaking to a number of other people. As for the ballet of ambassadors that we saw, one ambassador coming in, another one being withdrawn, those are bilateral issues between those countries concerned. Ms. Salome.
Stéphane, you mentioned the number of internally displaced people in Ukraine is now 6 million. That's triple what it was, I believe, at the end of last week. I'm just wondering how that number went up so quickly. Are people moving more now? Or is it a better, more accurate count by the migration office, or what accounts for that sharp jump?
Probably a little bit of both, but I think what we have seen in the last, frankly, over the weekend, is a real increase in the intensity of the fighting. Notably, the number of airstrikes reportedly by the Russian Federation on city centers, and no doubt that has provoked, as would be a natural human reflex of people to move. Ibtisam.
So my question is on Sudan. As you know, the demonstrations continue to happen there, and the security forces continue to attack a peaceful demonstrator. If you have any comments, and if you have also any updates on the political situation regarding the UN involvement.
Mr. Pertz and his team at Unitimes continue their work, continue dialogue with various parties, including, and very, very important, in close collaboration with the African Union. The continuing use of lethal force by the government is truly tragic against peaceful demonstrators. People have a right, wherever they are, to take to the streets, demonstrate peacefully. It is intolerable that security forces use live ammunition or lethal weapons against them. Okay, this seems like an end to our wonderful session here. It's only Monday, right? All right, hasta luego.